Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. My name is Cynthia Sharp and I am a biofeedback specialist and healing energy work practitioner and a parent of a child with Down syndrome. And today I'm a little delayed because I went to go ahead and get my little tissue boxes just in case. Sharing my story might get me a little emotional as we connect. And I explain my vulnerability in the whole process of becoming a parent of a child with Down syndrome, and then the eventual development of becoming a practitioner. So thank you. I am honored that you have chosen to join me. Please, if you have any questions or any comments, let me know. It will help guide this whole process and make it much more worthwhile, that it's not just me talking about how wonderful biofeedback is, but truly being of assistance to you, which is my intention. So where to begin? I will let you know a little bit about myself. Prior to becoming a parent, I was an educator. I love kids. I used to teach here in Collier County in Naples, Florida, and loved it. And then I eventually went into medical sales some years after. Then during my time in medical sales, I met my soon-to-be, at that time, husband, and we had our son. And it was a beautiful expectation. We were delighted that we had finally, after a couple years of trying, finally got pregnant and were expecting. And we were expecting a perfectly healthy child. And a week after delivery, we got the diagnosis that he was going to need open heart surgery. His heart situation had changed, and his heart rate had changed, and that gave notice that he may be with Down syndrome. So we didn't have any idea for about a definite diagnosis for about a month, because we were trying to wait until we knew that we were preparing for the open heart and the blood draws were going to happen. So we entered into stress. We really entered into stress at that time because we weren't prepared for a diagnosis. We were prepared to have one reality of, this is a perfectly healthy child, and now not only do we have one diagnosis, a major diagnosis of open heart, we had the diagnosis of it's possible Down syndrome. And not only did we have to, prepare ourselves for both, we had a struggle. We had to prepare him and make sure that he lived for open heart. And it was such a difficult time because his heart was working so hard. He was burning through all the calories. So it became a struggle for us. For him, it became frustrating in trying to get him fed and to accept food and well, not food, but formula, and to get through that. So he had his open heart at 5 months, and I had been doing some alternative medicine while he was in utero, and actually had a massage therapist who helped and assist us with a natural childbirth. And then once he was out of the hospital, we continued with alternative medicine to go ahead and help him and help us not have to return to the OR. Just did not want to have to go through open heart, and wanted to make sure that his heart was resolved and perfectly healed, no holes. So that did happen. Then my husband lost his father and it was stressful again. Our son was about a year and a half years old, and it was just all the stress and vulnerability that happened with accepting his diagnoses and having to create a new life of therapy, speech. We were now in a transition of a loss, and I just knew that we needed something. And because I had been doing alternative medicine, one of my contacts in alternative medicine had called me and said, hey, there's a practitioner who would like to go ahead and volunteer her time and help, at the time she said special needs family, to see if she can make an improvement. So I contacted the practitioner, and I got to know her, and she started doing cranial release therapy on our son. And it worked. I mean, I didn't notice a big change. But what was amazing was, hold on, because there's an airplane going by. When she looked at me and she goes, I'm going to learn this new energy work, and it's called Access Bars. And it works on past lives, etc. What if we could actually help your son work on his past lives and make this one a different reality? And I was like, ooh, I like that. Let me have that. So I was all enthusiastic and realized very quickly as I was watching her do it that it looked so simple, and it looked like something that I could go ahead and do. So I ended up taking a course and learning it. It became my way of dealing with our own family's stress. And in doing so, I noticed my husband started calming, our son started calming, I started calming. And I kept on learning some energy work, and then never got to that point where I got our family completely in a state of calm, because soon after, and this happens with every family, dynamics change, and our son started waking multiple times in the middle of the night to the point that we were up. And I know that a lot of children with Down syndrome have problems with insomnia, and our son was amongst that population. And so we were re-triggered with great stress because of insomnia, which created health issues both for my husband and for myself, and obviously for our son, because he wasn't getting the sleep that he needed. So I had to quickly find something to alleviate this newly acquired stress, and it took time, and it took trying to find the right practitioner, because I actually did find it. I walked into a biofeedback office and did find a biofeedback practitioner, and was excited and elated that this person was going to be able to help our son. What happened and what unfolded is that our son acted as if he had eaten 10 different chocolate chip cookies after the session. He was wired. He was up and like the Energizer battery, and he was already like the Energizer battery beforehand. So I quickly realized, well, I'm not going to do that one again. And about a year later, I ended up walking into a different biofeedback office and establishing my energy practice in their office. And that's how I got to know about the system that I use today, and how I actually got certified. Was the first level of certification. It was astounding. And why was it astounding? Because even though I was doing energy work, I didn't realize how stressed I was at that time. And I, didn't realize some of the things that my own son was experiencing because he couldn't communicate. And children with Down syndrome tend to have delays in communication. Well, he wasn't quite yet diagnosed with apraxia. It wasn't until about a year and a half later that he was diagnosed with apraxia, which totally explained to me why his speech was so delayed. So he was never able to completely express to us, I have a tummy ache and that's why I'm up. I'm going through growing pains and my body hurts. I'm catching a cold or I've got a headache. Any of that, just he wasn't able to communicate. And not that typical kids are able to, but they're able to just say my tummy hurts, or just point to a region a little bit more, and there's more of a back and forth communication that gives headway. It gave me power as an adult, and it gave me power as a parent, and that's what I want for each and every additional needs parent, because we come into this diagnosis and I think we're stripped. We are made vulnerable once we're given the diagnosis. Your child may or may not do this, that, this, depending upon how their Down syndrome is expressed. And I didn't like that. I didn't like the vulnerability that I had. I didn't like being told that, children with Down syndrome only have this kind of IQ or have an immune compromised system. And to me, that reality wasn't supposed to be mine. And I didn't want that reality for myself or for my family, and definitely not for my son. So becoming a biofeedback practitioner and working with the system helped me have a greater communication, greater compassion for my son, and a greater realization of what I wanted for myself. And why does biofeedback work? Well, how do I put this? Because I have to be very specific about the verbiage that I use, because the biofeedback system that I use is an FDA approved stress management device. It is a medical device in Europe. It is not a medical device here. And thank goodness, because otherwise I would not be able to go ahead and do it and assist other families. And I really do believe that my experience through my own life and my own unfolding with our family has helped me assist other families. And I'll go into that later. But biofeedback actually helps balance stress. And with children with Down syndrome and their immune systems, we're told that they're compromised, right? I recently watched another parent who is a physician discuss how her own child impacted her practice. And she realized that children with Down syndrome in the first 6 months lose 60% of their neurons. And so that communication that is supposed to be happening isn't happening when we think that typical growth and development should be happening. So it really takes energy for them to do things because they don't have the same amount of neurons that they were born with. And that's why their development is slower. Good news is there is a way to go ahead and develop more neurons. She has her own protocol. I found my own that has worked for myself and for our son. And biofeedback has definitely given and improved his mental capacity and his brain capacity, where he can actually think. He's much more rational. He's less reactive and more responsive. And I know each and every one of us additional needs parents wants that. Instead of that fight and flight of running off and escaping, or having aggressive behavior, or having that reactivity, we want that being able to communicate with our child. That's what biofeedback did for us. When we first moved into our home, our son was scared of dogs. And it was a sensory response for him. So much so that if he heard a dog barking across the way, he would run back into our home. Now he hears a dog bark, he'll like freeze, he'll stop, he'll think about it, and then he'll move on. And sometimes not even that, he'll continue playing. Like, especially when he's swimming in the pool, like it doesn't even faze him. How awesome would that be for your life and your child, that whatever triggers they have, like over insects or over like food, isn't a trigger anymore. And it becomes like, oh, I can tolerate that. And it's less of a burden on you, or less of a trigger for you to say, one more thing we need to go ahead and work on, right? Another therapy, because as a parent of an additional needs child, you become their therapist, and you become their everything, their medical doctor. How are we going to go ahead and treat this? And it is a constant balance, and sometimes you don't feel like you have time for yourself, or to just be you. And that's really what this does. And it has definitely helped me do that for myself and for my family, and also for other families. So take, for instance, I had a family that came in that had a child who was constantly triggered. They were going to the chiropractor. They were seeing certain behaviors and wanted to stop those behaviors and wanted his schooling to be easier. And the chiropractor is the one who actually reached out to me to say, hey Cynthia, can you balance this? Can you help them change this pattern? And I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I can. Because in trauma, there's great knowledge. We don't realize that, but there is. And I have become much more centered, much more able to look at a situation and realize, okay, these are the factors that are happening, and let's look at all of it. And let's ascertain what would be the best way to move forward. School noticed a difference with this child. Parents noticed a difference with this child. The triggers dissipated. Parents were amazed at how well this child flowed into the office to have his sessions. So that was an in-person session. So I started with another child who started in person, but because of COVID, had to go ahead and go distance, telehealth. And obviously parents were not sure whether or not it was going to work. I assured them it still works the same. How does it work the same? Well, here's the funny thing, before I go into the actual child's history. Biofeedback works in person because there's a pad. The child is either on a blanket or on a pad, or the adult is on that, and there's signals sent from the interface that is connected to the computer. I'm reading the software. I send push a button, it sends the signal through the interface to the pad. But when you're talking telehealth, I have to, for my practice, ask certain questions and get an intake of whoever I'm working with. So I have your information, your address, your date of birth, your time of birth typically, where you were born, your picture, and all of that is a cumulative. That even if there were another John Smith, right, they wouldn't have your date of birth, they wouldn't have your time of birth, they wouldn't live at the same address, and they certainly wouldn't look like you. So all that information is put into the biofeedback system, and just like a GPS, it hones in on all that energy and puts a location to you and sends to you. Still a little fuzzy on that. Okay. I'm talking to you via the internet. I'm here in my home, you're in your home. I press a button to go onto Facebook and say I'm going live, and you go ahead and click onto Facebook and say I want to attend Cynthia's session. And so it is that simple. It is a connection, like calling on the cell phone. You know, no one has your actual cell phone number. If I dial by 1, I will get to your question, and thank you for asking. If I dial in through 1 digit differently, I will get one other person and not you. And still it's going and sending a signal up to the satellite and coming back down to your cell phone. And still we're connected but not connected, because now we don't have a landline like we used to 20 years ago. We now actually are mostly a cell phone driven community. Anne asked, will one biofeedback session make a significant improvement? That is a very good question. So I have a little one who I just worked on, and I've had several little ones who I've worked on. It doesn't make a significant improvement. It does make an improvement. So what this parent noticed is that after the first session, he was less reactive, more in control, and able to come back easier. Not where he was, because obviously he's changed, but not where quite yet where she's ready for him to be. So does it make a significant improvement? It makes an improvement. And just like I've shared before, when you're stressed, and our kids are consistently stressed with their systems, whether or not they're immune compromised, whether or not they're going to school, how our family dynamics are, it all interplays into the stress that they're experiencing, and their little souls are processing, and so are ours. And it just builds and builds upon itself like that Jenga tower. And as a practitioner, I'm only taking one Jenga piece out, session by session, maybe 2, until the tower, after session per session, dissipates and crumbles, and we still have a bit of a tower, but not as high of a tower as we did before, because things become much more in balance, much more not tolerable, but understanding for the individual, and there's a greater sense of comprehension. So what I love about the system is that with our immune compromised kids, it can actually help balance the immune system. When you think of the brain is 75% dedicated to the immune response. The brain. Pretty powerful. And if you consider that biofeedback can target the brain, and what I do and how I do it does target the brain and helps calm the brain. And if you're calmer, you learn better. You're more at peace. And when you're calmer and more at peace, you have a greater immune response because you're less stressed. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer out there? Does this make sense to you all? And what are you experiencing at home that you might have questions of? So I will share with academia, this COVID has definitely shifted things for us, right? We are now having to homeschool because that's the only possibility. And at first we were apprehensive, like every parent going, how is this going to work? And our stress was heightened as well. So we have done biofeedback for our little one to go ahead and make sure that he's less stressed. What we have noticed is, with the support of school, and we have a wonderful school that is providing the learning that he needs online, he has been able to actually improve even his testing scores. We got results yesterday from his iReady score that typically he doesn't do well on. Now, this is a combination. I'm not saying it was entirely biofeedback, but I am saying that his brain wasn't as reactive, and he has been feeling better. And my ability to go ahead and help administer the test and watch and give him breaks as needed assisted in increasing his score. It was amazing to watch, to get the results that we did. And I'll have to share, but I'll have to actually pull up the email so that you see that. Sessions that are recommended. So if you start with one session, yes, you may actually see a difference. It may be as small and minute as this parent had said, that her child wasn't as reactive and he was able to calm a lot better. But it is truly recommended to have a week-to-week session in the very beginning to establish a difference. So 6 weeks truly starts showing a difference. So I'll be honest, with insomnia, it took a lot longer because there's a lot more going on in there. So if you're having a child with insomnia, it took us some time. Good morning, my sister-in-law and Granny Annie are watching, and thank you very much for watching. And like I said, if you all have any questions, any thing that you are experiencing at home that you want to know, would this actually help balance, I'll happily answer that. So I shared with you that I was experiencing some health issues because of our son's insomnia. And one of those was major allergies. And I had skin reactivities, and I couldn't even go walking outside during like the change of spring because the pollen in the air would aggravate, and I mean like aggravate my sinuses to the point that I was sneezing or coughing, and I couldn't walk more than like a half a mile without turning right back around to go back home. And it was just that, it was aggravating. So biofeedback helped calm my system, which then helped me be able to go swimming even during pollen season here in Florida. And man, is it like intolerable sometimes. So it improved my sleep. What else has it? I've noticed that when I'm stressed and I am not either as balanced as I need to be or want to feel, that it does that for me. Constipation has been something that we've dealt with, and it actually does help with constipation and also diarrhea. So there are different kinds of biofeedback, just in case you want to know. There's in case your child has excessive bowel issues, there's biofeedback that is specifically made to address that. There's an actual instrument that is inserted and gives the child stimulation in that area to know when to go ahead and go, or when not to go. So there's also biofeedback for urinary incontinence that, like for women in their later years that are having urinary incontinence, there's a device to actually stimulate that area to help with urinary retention. And there's also neurofeedback. And neurofeedback differs from this biofeedback that I do. Neurofeedback has head attachments, and it very much involves the individual being a participant, where they're having to control their brain waves, and they're, just like in behavioral therapy, they're rewarded for their behavior. They're rewarded for keeping their brain waves at a certain brain level. The biofeedback that I do can work on brain waves, does work on brain waves, but it takes the effort and or consistency of having to be monitoring the monitor or the game that they're watching. It allows the individual to go ahead and relax, and it allows me to let them know, okay, these brain waves are out of balance and this is what we're balancing. So not only do I do the biofeedback when I'm doing the session, but I'm actually communicating what is actually being out of balance, and then reestablishing balance, all the while letting the client know what is off and what needs to be done to go ahead and create balance. So if they're having a lot of allergens, I can't say you're having allergies. I can say these are the sensitivities that are actually showing up today, because technically tomorrow you're a new individual. Even if you don't have biofeedback, tomorrow you might have a different reactivity to something else because of the stress load that you had yesterday. As we talked about, it all builds upon itself. So what are you all, I'll ask again, what are you all experiencing, and or how would you like for me to guide this? I would really love for this to be much more interactive and much more beneficial to each and every one of you. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm going to take a little water break. So I'm going to look at the test results as I'm waiting for your responses, and I will let you know how I can be of assistance. But I'll let you know what our son's test scores, how much they improved yesterday, because it was so phenomenal. I couldn't help but be so absolutely proud of him. And I do attribute that a lot to do with what we have done through biofeedback and stimulating the brain. And as I had explained earlier, children with Down syndrome lose like 60% of their neurons by the age of 6 months, and hence why there's more energy that is needed and expended to do the same thing that a neurotypical child would go ahead and have. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to try to turn this up and see if I can show it to you. His year-to-date growth was 173%. I'm going to try to make that a little more available to you. His progress to annual stretch growth was 99%, which is huge. And let's see. So one of the things that our son tended to do when he was at school taking a test was to go ahead and click through the questions. And obviously me being beside him and me knowing his behavior, I was able to go ahead and prompt him of when to go ahead and take a break. But he actually, overall diagnostic growth was 57%. And test taking takes a lot of energy. And I want to share something with you because we're speaking of additional needs. So like I shared before, how does biofeedback, thank you Anne for asking, how does biofeedback help with our immune system as well as with allergies? Well, if you consider that the brain is 75% dedicated to the immune response, if your brain is imbalanced, right, and if our brain isn't functioning, we're dead, right? I know it's such a light topic. But if it doesn't have the energy that it needs, it's not going to be able to provide the proper signaling for the rest of our body. And simply put, our children with Down syndrome definitely need a lot of energy to do what they do, to learn, to have the capacity to function. And if we don't take the time and invest, here it is. Okay, did you know that the average person uses 72.52 microvolts of energy to initiate voice production? That means talk. But individuals with Down syndrome need to use 131.57 microvolts, almost double, right? If that doesn't make sense to you as far as like how much energy we use and we take for granted, and then our children with Down syndrome are, working. I look at my son, I feel like he works twice as hard. And yes, as a parent, I sometimes feel like I work twice as hard too. But the biofeedback has helped me work on like his frontal lobe and be able to get him out of that fight and flight that he has been accustomed to because his body is constantly struggling. It has helped me work on his vagus nerve, which is the longest winding nerve in the body, and it wraps around our heart and most of our major organs. And so if I'm able to go ahead and send a signal to his vagus nerve, he's relaxing, and it helps him. And obviously if your organs are, improving your hormones and sending out, that's where your aminos are transporting into hormones and then into your neurotransmitters. To send a signal to actually improve that is amazing. And that's what I've noticed with our son. I can get him to go ahead and relax and improve that relaxation so that he can actually function. He can actually think clearer, which I gotta tell ya, helps me function and helps me think clearer, right? Because it goes hand in hand. The stress that they experience comes back, and sometimes if we're out of balance, it just recycles itself. And it's nerve-wracking as a parent to want to be in balance and to feel like I'm trying everything that I can for you what else can I provide for you, and not being able to do it. And as a practitioner, being able to share with you, well, right now, this is what they're experiencing. They're going through a growth spurt, so they're in pain. They're uncomfortable in their own bodies, and so therefore that's why you're seeing aggression, you're seeing non-compliance, you're seeing whatever you're seeing, or an intolerance or an unwillingness to go ahead and eat food right now, or scarfing down food, which I can also help balance that limbic system and the propensity to want to overeat, which a lot of children with Down syndrome do. Our son doesn't. I'm blessed that our son doesn't. He has okay, I'm all done. And if he wants a snack, he'll have a little bit of a snack, and we're choosing healthier foods. He has the capability of not being so sensory with his foods. He's a great eater in that regard. Like yesterday, I had a trail mix of an assortment of different nuts and just added some craisins because I know he loves his craisins. So I just added that in and scarfed down before lunch so he could go back and do his test. And then when it was lunchtime, had a wonderful lunch. That's what I want for each and every one of our families and every one of us, is to be able to be in balance, and to, when we're in balance, we absorb more of our nutrients. And if we absorb more of our nutrients, and especially with our children with Down syndrome that are using so much energy to even speak, to think, that they have more energy because they're able to absorb those micronutrients, those nutrients that will assimilate into hormones and neurotransmitters and help their brain function. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I would be honored to answer your questions. So far we've discussed how biofeedback is helping the immune system and allergies. Now obviously if your brain is functioning in its capacity and its right capacity, and it's 75% dedicated to the immune response, and your allergies are an immune response, your allergies would be dissipated because your brain is healthier. And as a practitioner, I can let you know today how you're showing up, how your child is showing up. This is what is out of balance, so that we can establish balance, and then we start seeing a change. And as I've said before, one session does help, but isn't going to reduce stress over the long run unless we're actually, just like with physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, that consistency on a regular basis will create a new pattern. And that's what we're doing. That's neuroplasticity. That is biofeedback. That consistency to go ahead and change your brain, change your mind. Because if you change the brain's functioning, you change how the mind is actually thinking. And it's pretty beautiful to witness. And I am honored by every single one of my clients who has chosen to come see me, because I get to be a part of that. I get to witness their transformation, and it's absolutely healing for me, because I witnessed my own family's transformation through this. And every parent wants to be the best parent that I know of, wants to be the best parent that they can be for their child, and wants their child to be the best parent that they can be for them. And it goes hand in hand. When that parent is feeling off, the child is feeling off. They can't help but feel off because they're open vessels. They feed off of us, and we feed off of them. So, and when you consider that children, like I had just shared, neurotypical children, we take for granted how easy it is to take a breath and to voice what it is that or that we need to share. And yet our children with Down syndrome use nearly double. the average person uses 72.52 microvolts of energy to initiate voice production, and children with Down syndrome use 131.57 microvolts. Nearly double. That's crazy energy. And if they're not getting it, and even think about us when we think, okay, you know, my brain is functioning, I'm neurotypical, but you know, our body is so stressed out that sometimes our brain function isn't what it needs to be because we've had so much stress in our life. It's built up like that Jenga puzzle, that Jenga tower. And so if we don't do things to reduce that stress and to create a sense of calmness, our brain isn't going to function as well. We're not going to think as clearly, and we're definitely not going to respond. We're going to react. We're going to be in that fight and flight. We're not going to be able to digest our food. We're not going to be able to eliminate our waste as well. And we're definitely not going to be able to communicate with our loved ones the way that we wish to. We're also going to have reactive bodies. And we're going to create immune deficiencies in our own cells, in our own bodies. So, I know I've been talking for quite some time. Does anyone have any questions or any comments? What I want above all for all additional needs families is to feel empowered. It's so overwhelming in the very beginning to get a diagnosis you didn't anticipate, to feel all excited about parenthood, and to feel like that might have been stripped away, or there's a new reality that wasn't expected. And to be able to feel that you have someone in your corner who relates, who understands, who has been through it and can acknowledge where you are and where you want to be and help you walk through that is what I want to do. That's my heart. So, attention. Attention can be affected, and right now with all the media that we have as adults, and especially our children getting on to, you know, the iPad or being with distance learning and being on the computer, it can be overwhelming to the brain, and it is reprogramming our children's brains, just to let you know. And it is reprogramming our brains because our frontal lobe is actually deactivated every time we're on social media. Every single time, and every time we're scrolling up, our eyes are shifting. And there are things that can actually be balanced regarding that. But I'd like to answer your question so I don't feel like I'm just talking about how wonderful biofeedback is. If you actually have questions regarding your family or your experience, something you'd like to go ahead and resolve, please let me know. Even if you want to personally message me, please do so, because I've got my phone right here so that I can actually see that. I think I have someone here. And thank you, Anne, for letting me know that I answered your questions. Oh, migraines, headaches, yes, can actually do. So there's much that can be done in homeopathy for headaches and migraines. So it depends. Sometimes migraines come at different times. It can be an oxygenation issue, and it can be like I'm talking about like a brain placement issue. So depending upon where your brain is feeling off balance, I can actually target like the midbrain, the thalamus, the frontal lobe, the different lobes, the occipital, the parietal, the temporal, and actually affect the different lobes that it might be actually coming from. And pain, oftentimes people have one side of the body that is being affected, and I have been able to help balance that as well for my clients. We negate to think that our brains, are so powerful. We just automatically think that our brains are functioning at the capacity that they should be, and with all that we're doing and retraining our brains to do with technology, it's not the case anymore. So we need to be very vigilant about our brain health so that our bodies function at optimum health. So thank you for asking. So if there are no other questions or factors, I'm going to let this be, but I would love to hear from you. If you want to personally message me, please do. And I do free consultations if you're wondering whether or not biofeedback can actually help your family and or you. I do free consultations so that you can understand and give you a better idea specifically what can be done for your child, for yourself, and if you need me to redirect how it can be done via distance, I'm happy to go ahead and do so. Thank you very, very much for joining me today, and I'm going to do this again next week. We can talk about anxiety and the reduction of anxiety, and I will wait to see what actually unfolds from here and see if we incorporate something more. So if you have enjoyed this talk and know someone who would benefit from it, please share it. I would be honored to go ahead and help whatever family needs my assistance. Oh, I love you, Anne. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your presence with me. And thank you for asking so many questions. That has helped me greatly. I appreciate you and all that have attended. So thank you. Happy Memorial Day weekend, and please stay safe during COVID-19. All right. See you next week, 10 a.m. Bye-bye.